Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Florida Relocation Guide. My name is Adam Hancock, and you have made it to the 2025 edition of my Sarasota A to Z guide, the video to replace all videos. This will be one of the most comprehensive guides that I could possibly think of to breaking down Sarasota on a high level and a very, very granular level. We're going to talk geography. I'm going to literally stand in front of a map, and I'm going to tell you where Sarasota fits into Southwest Florida, where the cities within Sarasota fit into Sarasota, and why any of that matters, and more importantly, functionally, how people begin to shop the area. Second, we're going to talk real estate, all the meaningful areas that people actually buy in, where they're located, what you can do within them, and most importantly, why people should or would move there at all. And lastly, we're going to talk lifestyle and amenities, and versus just randomly talking about things to do and the like, I am going to break down new stuff happening, new developments, what they mean, interesting commercial expansion, and just everything else that I think should be on your radar going into 2025. So I hope you enjoy this take. If I can help you in any way within the real estate market, whether you're ready now or 10 years from now, really please consider reaching out. We have an incredible team, free relocation guides. We have a monthly newsletter that's really, really helpful, and just a lot of different ways to get involved in the educational process of Southwest Florida. Without further ado, let's hop in. Okay, where I would like to kick off the video is with the subject of geography. And we have kind of a makeshift setup here, but all shticks aside, if you came down to Florida and were talking to me in person, this is the best way that I know how to explain whether you've been here 20 times or never been here at all. I think it's the best way to learn, in my personal opinion. So what we're gonna do with that being said is I want to speak to someone that the rare few that have maybe followed me for 3.5 years or so, see me do a lot of similar kind of videos to this, but also someone that has never seen me at all and also potentially have never been to Sarasota. So I don't want to alienate that, but I still want to go deep enough where I give context to the smartest person in the room. So that's what we're going to try to do. All right, starting off with the zoomed out version of Sarasota, Southwest Florida. The benefit of Sarasota is central proximity in a lot of ways. Tampa is above you, Naples is below you in the greater metro scheme. 1 hour above you, you have access to maybe the best big city in the state, not too big, not too overwhelming. Hour below you, you have Fort Myers. 2 hours below you, you have Naples. So in essence, if you're gonna go to Florida and you want to satiate all of the Florida needs within a close distance to you, I'd rather sit in the middle, get access to the rest. I think it's the best mousetrap personally when it comes to where you could choose to live in the state overall. As we zoom in one layer deeper to do the point of this video here to context of the A to Z idea, Sarasota is a 2-county primary conversation. You have Manatee, you have Sarasota. Sarasota County, basically Sarasota city limits, all of this kind of stuff, some of the Barrier Island beaches, and you go down and you have Osprey, Nokomis, Englewood, Northport, and Venice. Manatee catches like Longboat Key about halfway up, get all of this, you get some of the Lakewood Ranch stuff, you go out there to Parrish and all of that. But all of that sits within 2 primary counties. Now, once you have your head around that, that's kind of the simplicity of it. You could go a lot of routes, right? There's a lot of names on this map, a lot of places you can move, and borderline, it's extremely overwhelming, even in a metro that's not that large like this one, to venture into that conversation. I'm gonna go a different route because I think this is about a rhythmic functionality. 99% of the people that we have helped relocate, that I speak to on a daily basis, do the same 4 to 5 basic things when they're relocating. They come and they say, okay, we have central Sarasota. What now, right? One direction people go is they go northeast of town and start exploring this kind of stuff. So they'll go Lakewood Ranch, beyond. I'm going to explain that more in the real estate section, but they'll go, what is the deal with this stuff? We've heard about Lakewood Ranch, the multi-generational, all that kind of stuff. That's one direction they go. The first major juxtaposition to that direction is south. It's kind of the anti-that. So they'll go in this, they'll go South Sarasota, the Palmer Ranch, Osprey, Nokomis, the 2 drive-through towns on the way to them, Venice, and beyond. And they'll say, okay, why would I do this if I could do that, and vice versa. Then you have the middle. So that's typically what I would do is I'd ping, pong, and then say, what else is there? And that's central Sarasota that hugs the interstate. Because that's the big thing is like you see Sarasota downtown and the beaches and all this kind of stuff, but the heavy majority of people don't live here. They hug this interstate and they live about 10 to 15 miles kind of east, somewhere in this lane as they cascade down, and depending on what they like and their specific house criteria. So when I say what is everything else, I'm really talking about this area from like Fruitville to exit like 202 all of this kind of stuff where Sky Ranch is, Artistry, all these new communities. And then out here, you see all that green. Like the benefit of Sarasota is it's so condensed. Like you come out here and you're like, okay, like is that, it's really just this to this, So regardless of where you choose in Sarasota, unlike some bigger metros, it's hard to get far from anything, which gives you a real superpower as a buyer. So that's 1, 2, 3 in a high level view. And then you say, okay, well, there's a lot more land. What else is that? I think the rest gets in kind of anomaly stuff. So the reason that everybody hugs these areas is because everything else was already built. So if you come to town, one of the hardest things to navigate would be buying resales in amazing areas. Because look at the geography on these on a map, but you're navigating homes that were built in the 80s, the 90s. You have a full Amish Mennonite town built in Sarasota and one of the greatest geographies of all time called Pinecraft. People still riding the 3-wheel bikes, no electricity, the whole shebang, believe it or not. Palmer Ranch was the Lakewood Ranch before Lakewood Ranch, so an old school suburb, but if there's no resale homes available, you wouldn't even know there's 25 neighborhoods there. You have, so you have all of that, right? So still valid, but not as sexy as some of the master plan stuff. So that's that swath of land. And then you got tons of barrier islands, right? Siesta Key, that's where my parents live. That's a 7-mile long barrier island with 3 beaches on it. Casey Key below it, the home of Stephen King. You have Venice Island, which is one of the only non-barrier islands. And if you keep going below that, you have Caspersen Beach, Shark's Tooth Capital. You have Brohard Beach, the only dog beach in the county. I'm not going to get crazy here, but you have Manasota Key down in Englewood. And then you come up here and you have Lido Key, one of my favorites, one of the closest to downtown Sarasota, which is in here. And then Longboat Key is half Manatee, half Sarasota. So that's another barrier island beach that it looks long, but it's about the size of Siesta Key, a little bit more private. And then you go into Bradenton, Holmes Beach, Anna Maria Island. So again, that's not the average person that's moving to Sarasota that's going to those beaches. Lovely, but again, not the average person. And then you have Western Bradenton, the non-suburb Bradenton. So that's the mainland Western Bradenton, which is a different animal, which we'll get into. And then kind of like other stuff, affordable waterfront living along the brackish Manatee River. You have Northport. You have, the whole point of all of this is that, in my opinion, there are a lot of places you could live, but everyone starts with the same 3 to 4 and only choose 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 after they learned about the 3 to 4. That's the benefit in going geography first and real estate second. And that's kind of my thesis on point number 1. And this will roll right on the back to point number 2, which we will break down what is available real estate wise, lifestyle, housing criteria, etc. in our next section. Okay, now we are back to the desk and ready to talk real estate. And the reason that I went in this particular order like this is that real estate, I think, literally piggybacks on the back of the location conversation. Because how you would end up in these different areas, why you're comparing the things I mentioned in the last section is, 100% is in part due to the lifestyle that you desire if you're looking to come from out of state. But the deeper you get into it, I think it starts to tilt to housing criteria, where you end up narrowing into areas because of your particular housing needs and what satiates that. And then you reverse it and say, does that lifestyle also work for me? So with that being said, I thought it would be valuable to break down each of your options a little further, where they're located, the communities within them, and just generally give you to potentially narrow your focus. Okay, first up, I would like to head northeast of town. And what I'm calling town is downtown Sarasota, so that's gonna be our pillar that we kind of anchor everything off of. We're gonna head slightly above exit 210 and to the 9 to 11 mile one-way range to downtown Sarasota. That's gonna be our starting point. And then we're gonna border at about State Road 64. I'll show on a map here, but it's kind of this framed out kind of parallel street circle on a map situation. The reason that people choose this area is if you like the suburbs, if you think you like the suburbs, you love them, or you think you even need them. This is the king. It's the best mousetrap, hands down, no argument. So you have every price point prospectively, you have every property type. When you come home and you have your nice neighborhood pool and your clubhouse and all of that, you don't just have that. When you leave, you have multiple, not just shopping centers, proper downtown centers. There are libraries, aquatic centers, all your kids' sports are right there. You have high-rated public schools, Montessori. I mean, it gets borderline to everything but the beach. That's why people talk about this area so much, because a lot of places do this in small ways. Master plan is becoming a very inclusive thing as of late, but not at quite this scale and the maturity of what it would look like if you visited today. It's one of the rare areas. It not only looks like I'm describing when you get here in person, I think it looks even better. So most of this section, not 100% of it, but most of the section I'm circling is called Lakewood Ranch, Florida. There are communities in between, but they all live the same lifestyle. What you're basically gonna get here is 35, 40 plus newer style communities, some gated, some not. More than half, if not more of those are gonna be actively building right now. Some are brand new. So you can build a house, you can buy a quick move in from a builder, or you can buy a resale house. And if you buy a resale house, most of them, the oldest homes were built in 1995. A lot of them were built post 2010 when they started opening up the floor plans more and all of that kind of stuff. And then you really do have the idea of just variety and abundance. That's why you start here if you like the suburbs, because it's the foundation. Even if you don't choose here, it's the best place to start to kick rocks down the road after you do this one time, because you have $250,000 townhomes in walkable communities. You have villas galore within master planned areas. So versus a condo, you come here, you get a villa, you get the lowest fees, lowest CDD, everything like that, shared maintenance, and a great investment or a homestead. Single families in every capacity you could think of. You can have bougie golf with a $6 million house in a boutique community. You could have crazy amenities in a 55 and up active adult living community with a full-time lifestyle director. There's more kid-friendly stuff where they go ham during Halloween and all this kind of stuff. And really whatever your heart desires, whatever most people's heart desires, this is a place that you could find it. That's the best way I would say it. And on top of all of that, to have something like this sit this close to some of the best beaches in the entire world, not just my opinion, like ranked beaches in the entire world, adds a bigger layer of rarity. Okay, the second direction I want to head is south. We're gonna go directly south of downtown Sarasota by about 10 miles. And when speaking about this one and the vagueness that's gonna come with it, this is a lot of the reasons that I don't like many of the lists I see on like best places to live in Sarasota and the surrounding area. Because the area that I'm going to talk about now is going to start at 10 miles, but we're going to stretch all the way to about 29 miles one way from downtown Sarasota, because this is the actuality of how most people will experience it when they come to town. It looks like many, many options, but most people are shopping in these large swaths of land trying to achieve similar things. So I think the ambiguity that comes with some of the things I'll say, I think in a lot of ways it's simpler if you look at it from that kind of perspective. So there's my piece there. So what we're going to do is we're going to start in Osprey, which is the city right below where Sarasota kind of runs out. We're going to stretch it through Nokomis to Venice. And then I want to include, because I think it's poignant in this kind of conversation, a new kind of branding master plan concept called Welland Park. And Welland Park is going to touch, really South Venice, Northern Englewood, and Western Northport, even though like we're really kind of hugging the coastline here. We're not going to really stretch east too much in this general thesis. So one of the main reasons amongst a few that I want to talk about here that people would end up in this direction is if you go to Lakewood Ranch and you're like, I get it, you're right, like it is Pleasantville, right? You're someone that's saying, the Sarasota that I remember visiting and the Sarasota I've been dreaming about moving to for 15 years had this like old Florida feel to it. It's coastal, it's not too big, it's not too small, it's got a balance. And yeah, I might be looking for a new construction house because not only the logistics are great with that, but Lakewood Ranch is, I'm looking for old Sarasota, right? And the further we get in history here, a lot of that doesn't exist in the same way quite as much. But this is one area that feels much more like that than the alternative. So on top of that, a couple other things that people really pick out. One is coastal proximity. If you look at the shape of the state here, and we'll try to show on a map, as you go down on the same interstate line, on the same I-75, as you go down, the shape of the state makes it closer to the water overall just by going south. So where Lakewood Ranch and that northeast conversation, where they start, kind of the closest you could get to the beach is maybe the 20-minute range if you're lucky, if you cross the bridge and it's no traffic, all that kind of stuff. Well, if you go simply south, Osprey and below, for the most part, it's almost difficult to get more than 20 minutes from the beach, regardless of where you live, which is a huge, huge perk. Although, albeit that these are different beaches, right? So eye of the beholder, but still coast is coast. The second big one, which I mentioned briefly, is that the balance, right? Lakewood Ranch not only gives you suburbia, but it gives you a lot more on top of it. It gives you all the suburbia anyone could want, right? If you love that, it's the dream. But if you wanted maybe a tenth of the size of it, you still wanted the new construction, still wanted communal amenities, still wanted some of that, but not all of it, then I think that old Sarasota and new construction master plan, this particular area has a weird balance of it that most places in the state do not. And 3 is just general affordability. Again, when I say affordability when talking about Sarasota, it's all in perspective of what you're bumping it against, but we're already assuming you're looking at all of Sarasota as your comparison point. The thing with going south back in the day when I was growing up, still probably in a lot of people's minds today, is it was junior Sarasota. It was like everybody wanted Siesta Key, Lido, maybe even Longboat, but everybody's hovering around that. That's why all that stuff was already built. And then if you went down to Venice, you were 45 minutes one way from downtown Sarasota, depending on how far you got. So this is where, the demographic was a little older, heavy retirement because no one really needed to be close to the stuff. And all the things that went with the sacrifice in the minds of the biased people came with you going south and getting affordability for the trade-off of losing the miles. Well, even in the present day, as we stand here today, a lot of that still exists, which still allows for the same house in this area versus other areas that I think technically would be comparable to someone from out of state that has no biased perspective of history is simply cheaper. So that's a benefit to you if this is actually your preference. Okay, with all of that being said, just to kind of talk about a little bit more as I digress, what you can get here. It basically surrounds the premise of this main central area called Venice Island. That is both the non-barrier beach island and it's the downtown, historic downtown Venice. It sits there and people basically live on the island, above it, or below it. That's why I included this whole swath of land. Let me explain the easiest to the most intricate. Above the island, Nokomis and Osprey. Nokomis is closer to the island, Osprey is closer to Sarasota. The reason you go above it is simply that you still get a lot of the aesthetic, you're still below Sarasota city limits, but you're in between. So instead of being 29 miles, you're 10 to 13 miles. You can look up, have Sarasota, look down, have all that is Venice. It's way more docile because a lot of people don't even consider these towns. They just drive through them on the way from Sarasota to Venice. And then there's emerging new construction going on in the northern Venice and the Comus area a lot of these days, so you get a little bit of that, but it's not going to be as master plan. It's going to be individual communities. You have a really highly rated school districts with Laurel, Nokomis, Pineview, which is the #1, it's School for the Gifted, #1 elementary school, I think, in the United States. And you have just basically balance, right? Don't lose, don't gain, don't sacrifice too much. On the island itself is second. The one, to walk to the beach in the entire Gulf Coast, from the Panhandle all the way down to Marco Island, Venice Beach is always #1 or #2 in being able to walk from your house or condominium to the beach for cost. It's one of the most affordable overall. Also, because there's no barrier island, there's no bridge division, if you get anywhere around this place, it feels more coastal. It's hard to explain, it just does. You can feel the breeze, it just, everywhere on the island you can walk to the beach. And it's a quaint historic thing. It feels more of like a Siesta Key had a baby with like quaint Anna Maria Island somewhere in there. It's like a laid back historic. It feels like what you would picture if you were visiting a touristy retirement kind of town. But affordability is the name of the game. And it's not as bougie as northern Siesta Key and especially Longboat Key would be. And then below the island, you ask yourself, why would I live 29 miles one way from downtown Sarasota if I could live 10 miles from it and still have a lot of the stuff you're explaining? Well, below it you have Welland Park. Welland Park is the rare case of master plan community combined with coastal proximity. It does not happen a lot because most of that land's already taken up. They can't build a Lakewood Ranch 9 miles from the coast, right? They got to keep going east. Welland Park combined, basically if you took what I mentioned earlier, about 15% of Lakewood Ranch and dropped it within 18 minutes or less to the beach, you have, at this point, you have 9 to 11 plus communities, new construction communities, all very, very new. You have all the same builders that you're familiar with probably as Neal, Mattamy, Lennar, all that kind of stuff. There is golf communities. There's a 55 and up community that's relatively affordable. You have boutique stuff with 100 homes. You have boutique custom builders like Sam Rogers. New stuff's emerging. It's going to keep expanding. They built a brand new downtown that's quite lovely. So you not only have 15 minutes to downtown Venice and all that stuff, but you have downtown Welland Park. It gives you kind of a throwback, and it reminds me a lot of like if you would have had this in like Dunedin, Florida, or like Wilmington Beach in North Carolina. It gives a really great way to whether raise a family or retire without it just all being old and historic. So that's what I'd say about that. And I don't want to get crazy here. Of course, this is an A to Z guide to Sarasota, so I want to try to get through the rest of these. But if you have any questions at all, you could talk about every one of these individually, or at least I could, for an hour or more. So we can help you in any area that you possibly need, but let's move on to number 3. All right, the third one I'm just going to call Sarasota, and we have gone northeast, we've gone south. So the question you should be asking yourself at this point, if you've done this tour, is no regrets. How do I have no regrets? So what else can I get? And this is the third major pillar, and that's the middle. The reason you really don't want to start here is because it is random. If you're not from this area, it's randomness. You're going to drive about and see new construction communities amongst stuff that's been there forever. You're going to look right and see another neighborhood, not really know where you are, where you should be, why any of it matters. And if you're at the mercy of like a 20 home resale Zillow tour, that's just a tough way to view it, right? Because you're at the complete mercy of what's available, not really what's best for you. You're not picking a neighborhood saying, are there any homes? You're just trying to learn the town like that. And I just think that's the improper way to go about it. So one of the main reasons you would end up here, and this could be a Captain Obvious point, is just the Sarasota stuff. Like the more you get context of these other areas, because they're so like extreme in what they are, you'll find more value in this one. But it really has to be layered out over time. And if you're moving to this area and it's, Siesta Key, downtown, it's the cultural coast, Lido, you're like, the bay's right there, the beach is on the other side, all of that kind of stuff. Well, this is the meat of it. This is the stuff that was already there. This is the reason that everything else had to be built on the fringes. And while that's a little harder to navigate because it's not as clean cut, it still doesn't change the geography that already exists. So the location of just the infrastructure itself is going to be one of the biggest kind of tipping points of this conversation, right? If you go from like Fruitville Road down to exit like 200, that whole, whether you go east, west, whatever it may be, this is where it'll define what you're close to. And then because you went to Lakewood and because you went to Welland and you went south and all this kind of stuff, you can view communities that you saw and you could say, is there a sort of version of it? Which is not gonna feel like those at all, but you can build a Taylor Morrison home in that area. You can do a Coulter home in that area. And one of the bigger things is you could watch a video like this and have not gone super deep yet in your search and say like, whoa, how is that much different? Waterside's 10 miles away from the beach, and so is Osprey. How is that much different than what you're talking about? Well, the problem with those other areas is that's one small piece of those areas, right? And it's a very niche piece of that conversation. So Waterside, for instance, is 12 of the 40 neighborhoods within Lakewood Ranch. It's the closest one, yes, but it's also the most niche. It is every community is not like its neighbor, and if it doesn't work for you, and it's one of the most expensive areas, it's also in the Sarasota County School Districts, if one of those doesn't work, then most of the rest of Lakewood Ranch is gonna put you more in the 35 plus minute range to the coast and the downtown. Same with the southern conversation. I talked about Osprey being 10 miles, but I didn't talk about Venice or Welland Park, where most people are attacking right now. The difference between 10 and 21 miles is vast. And if you don't end up in the one, then Sarasota could have a little bit more robust infrastructure, at least when it comes to resales, to get you in that territory. And the second one that I see people that really fall in love with this kind of relay to me, at least as it looks right now in 2024, going into 2025, is that they're purposely choosing that it's not those other things. They might want, like I said about Welland Park, right? They might want a little bit of it, but they don't want a Pleasantville. They don't want all of that. They just want to be in Sarasota. And even if they want a new construction house, they're not looking for all the things that would come with the greatest new construction community that ever existed. And or because you want to be close to certain stuff, right? A lot of this doesn't exist in the new construction land, right? If you want to be west of I-75 in Sarasota, all of that stuff was already built, right? So if you want to be 6 to 7 miles from things, then you have to remodel a resale house. You have to knock down one and do urban infill new construction, or find some sort of niche boutique little community that was built. And they're simply not going to wipe out whole neighborhoods and replace them. So it's kind of beggars can't be choosers if you choose proximity over house. Okay, and as we finish Sarasota, let me just briefly cover, of course, what you can get or what generally you'll be working with house-wise. Let's break it up in some sections. Let's start on the I-75 interstate line and go slightly east. This is where you will, of course, find stuff that already existed, but more new construction in this area that hovers right below Waterside. So you have a community called Artistry. This is going to be Coulter Homes, Coulter with a K. That is one, and now mixed with Cardell Homes. Coulter builds some of the highest end single family homes if you're not doing fully custom construction. Think like a Toll Brothers-esque. That's an interesting community. Across the street, it's now built out, but it's not that old, called Worthington. They built that a few years ago. It's Cardell and MI, I believe, exclusively in there. As you go down, you'll see a community called Sky Ranch. This is maybe one of the best examples to learn right now.
This is like a mini suburb within itself. It's not like a ranch, but it's a thing. So Taylor Morrison headed this up. There's custom construction in there as well now, but they've done multiple different communities within a general area called Sky Ranch, and they all kind of peacock in different directions to give you different things, but very similar to what they've done in other areas, but now you have a Sarasota version. It's the best way I'd say it. You have a community called Grand Park down there, which is similar, right? If you like Neil builders, Neil communities, they built Windward, Canoe Creek, Indigo, Wisteria, Avelina. Well, this is Windward of Lakewood Ranch in Sarasota, basically. So it gives you that option. Bleed down below, and you got a bunch of resales around it. Bleed down below, you have that Palmer Ranch swath. That's South Sarasota before you get to kind of deep into the Nokomis area. And that's going to be that master plan before it was a thing. It could be interesting for resales. If you really saw how many communities are in there, they got something for everyone. It's just older, you know. This is the late 90s, 2000s version of what you see today. In the middle, you have Bee Ridge, Sarasota Springs, Gulfgate, Pinecraft, Fruitville. This would be a lot of resales. You'll see in 70s, 80s plus. So you'll see normal Florida-style homes that like people have lived in forever and never done anything to, like pink carpet in the bathroom. You'll see a lot of like full remodels, like flipping kind of things. You'll see rentals. So this one is just a shopping bucket thing and understanding restrictions if you want to buy an investment, understanding what that neighborhood means, if you're overpaying, if you're not. That is a old school comps kind of game there. And then if you bleed close enough to the coast and you cross over the coastal interstate is what I would deem it, and that's US 41, also called Tamiami Trail. I-75 is over here, US 41's here. It's called west of the trail because it's west of Tamiami Trail. But what that means basically, it's the closest mainland you could get because of the Barrier Islands before crossing over to the Barrier Islands. So it's some of the best pieces of land in all of Florida because you still have the mainland stuff. You haven't gone full committal of like I'm beachside living, but you're on a bay, beach is here, golf is here. So you got access to a lot of stuff. Now, all is not equal because west of the trail, you can go up and down a pretty far area in Florida. But the part I'm talking about is, let's say, mid-Siesta Key to Lido Key. I can break all this down on a phone call, a lot easier if you're really looking in this area. But you basically want to look, when you're looking at west of the trail, of bridge access, I would say. So the ideal would be that you can both access the beaches, and you can look back downtown, and you can access both Siesta Key and Lido out to Longboat Key. The value changes if you get too far south, too far north, because what you do is you still have the bay access, but you lose access to something. If you go too far south to really the adjacent Osprey neighborhoods by Siesta Key, then you'll lose a little bit of downtown Sarasota and Lido Key because they're 6 miles away. You go too far north to like Sapphire or Indian Beach by the Ringling area, you'll lose going south and you get closer to the airport. So the middle is really ideal, but the value lies in you get kind of everything. All right, now that we really have the meat of the conversation covered, I would say hopefully in depthly, what I don't want to do for this year's version is make it non-consumable. At least I'm trying to. I don't want to talk for 60 more minutes about neighborhoods. And trust me, if you could call and we could break this down in a way shorter version individually, customized to you. But I want to talk about everything else in 2 main buckets. And one is called Go Further, Get More. The beauty of this conversation is if you even half track with what I'm saying, is there is a version of every single thing that I said where you can say, hey, I like this, but what's the cheaper version of it? And why would I do that? And what's the differences between them for everything I said just based on those 3 main items? So for instance, right, Northeast was our first one. You go to Lakewood Ranch. Well, there's an area beyond it called Parrish, and beyond that called Southern Palmetto, and then you keep going up to like that Woolmama, Ruskin, all the way if you wanted to in the Tampa area. The difference between being in Upper Lakewood Ranch at 20 miles or so to 29, you could save $200,000. They have sister communities all throughout Lakewood Ranch that are also in Parrish. You can kind of make those choices of being like, I'm already up here, what's this mean to me versus that? And so you got that. You could take the southern Venice area, that Welland Park area, you can go deeper into Englewood. You could take the western Northport and go eastern. Northport's actually it's a huge area that not that many people live on. You could do the same with the kind of the coastline. You could say, okay, I like the downtown Sarasota and all that. You could go north up to western Bradenton above the airport. Same with like, okay, I can't afford or I don't want to pay what it would cost to live on Sarasota Bay. Well, you could go up and live on the western part of the brackish Manatee River, have open access out to Anna Maria Island and all of that kind of stuff, and find ways to carve that out. But you're only asking those questions because you liked some other preferred option potentially, and then now I can juxtapose them. You can come in town. I used to do this with people like 4 hours on one day and maybe like a circle back day the second day. But because when they leave on their trip, it's a lot of information. But when you leave now, instead of just a fun home tour, you can be really dangerous from an education standpoint forever, And more importantly is now you can ask me random questions, and I could give you an example almost in the whole state of Florida, definitely in Southwest Florida, to enunciate that. But the thing is, and the thing is, of course, these aren't going to look the same, right? You're going to trade a little bit of location, but Parrish isn't going to look like Lakewood Ranch, and Northport's not going to look like Venice, and all that kind of thing. So, it's kind of an obvious point that there are give and takes with this, but not everyone prefers the same thing, and where you can lean right and other people lean left, you could gain a huge benefit. All right, and the final one, as we wrap our very lengthy real estate section, let's talk barrier island, or just beaches. If you're someone that wants to do that, either investment or you're gonna go all in on beach, and my parents live right on Heigl and Siesta Key, I get the merits and all of that. It's a lovely, lovely lifestyle. It represents Sarasota in a fantastic way. Let me just give you a very brief rundown of the aesthetic and lifestyle differences amongst them, in my opinion. Okay, start with Siesta Key, the main guy, right? Quartz white sand. It is beautiful. There are 3 beaches I mentioned. Most people only think of the north side of the island. That's where Siesta Key Village is. That's where a lot of the homestead residences that are really nice are above the main beach and the main beach. And then you have Crescent in the middle, Turtle below, which is kind of underrated, but the real thing that everyone thinks of, lifeguard stands, quartz white sand, is the siesta part. This island is going to be very tourist-centric, of course. It is going to be more laid back, more approachable, probably a little less pretentious, but you're going to want that. It also is 6 miles below downtown Sarasota, so it's not the closest one to it, but it's not far from really anything. Right above it is a beach called Lido. This is where St. Armand's Circle is. It's like 100+ shops, boutiques, like real John Ringling design kind of place. A lot bougier than Siesta Village. Siesta Village is a little village. This is a high-end feeling kind of place. There's a snippet of homes around it on Lido Key, but it's a small area. And again, this is a hustle bustle area. Above that, this bleeds into lower Longboat Key. Longboat Key is that one that's half Sarasota, half Manatee County. It's about the size and length to Siesta Key, but it's going to be way more residential feeling, way more private feeling. There are public accesses, but not in the same way. So this is an area that if you're going to really looking for I'm living here full time, I don't want where everyone's coming, not no tourists, right? You can't, these are beautiful places, can't keep people out, but it's going to be way more residential feeling, very high end, a lot of condominiums and a lot of homestead residences, obviously high end when it comes to price as well. And it's very narrow. So it's a bay to beach kind of situation. Beyond those two, I've already kind of explained Venice a little bit. Venice Island, that's that real walkable, affordable one. You have Casperson and Brohard beaches right next to it. Minnesota Key is the more docile version of that in the Englewood area, but you're all the way south. There's nothing below Englewood. You fall out, Cape Coral's below it, but not functionally below it. You got to go east and down to get to Fort Myers and Naples. Then you go the other direction above Longboat Key. Anna Maria Island is the northernmost tip before you would head to the Tampa Bay area. That's very niche. People really like it, but that's a commitment. You got to really look to be on an island, kind of, because you're far, far, far. In between is Holmes and Bradenton, but the functional living ones that everybody are targeting are those first kind of 3. You have Casey Key and all that kind of stuff, but that's more boutique. And that I would juxtapose them in lifestyle, and then the price points usually come with it, but materially they're similar.
Okay, my third section is amenities/lifestyle. Because that I go so deep into these areas holistically when I talk about geography and real estate, and also because those first 2 I prioritize so heavily, here I don't want to get crazy, but I'm going to mention some high-level stuff, and then I more importantly want to talk about cool new things going on, things that I think should be on your radar from a development and a commercial amenities standpoint. So low-hanging fruit-wise, Sarasota beaches, right? I mentioned they're awesome, but they're not just awesome. Siesta Key's been ranked individually as #1 overall in the United States on lists and stuff. So you have uniqueness to them. You have sand that doesn't get hot to the touch. You have these things that don't exist everywhere. That's low-hanging fruit. A lot of people are aware of that. Arts and culture, another one. Sarasota is considered the cultural coast of the state of Florida because of the pure density per capita of theaters, art galleries, museums. A lot of the history is really cool about, John Ringling and these people targeted these areas, and a lot of the development cascaded on the back of this. It is a bougie area. There is wealth, all these kind of things, but for some reason, in my personal opinion, it's done it in a non-pretentious alienation way. And so it's an intentional money, and which I think is different than a lot of places I have lived, What else? Restaurants. There is a rather diverse restaurant scene. People may disagree with this point, but in my opinion, it's kind of diverse for, again, the size of this place. I think a lot of that is the attraction of the chefs and people that the restaurateurs that want to live here because it's such a great place to live. But you have Zagat rated stuff. You have districts that are play first, work second. So even the main urban thoroughfares aren't commuter districts. People are running in and out, and they're walkable, clean feeling, and I think there's a lot of perks to that. And then, of course, it's always ranked on the best place to live in the United States list. I think it was number 2 in Florida this year and 18th in the United States. Retirement's the same way. It's really up and coming in the demographic shifts of making it more attractive for younger people and families, especially if you can work from home or you're independent. And I think that's the gist. And let me hop and talk about some development things I think are interesting.
Okay, and lastly, let me just talk about some interesting happenings I think are going on right now. One is, a few years ago, even like 10 years ago, one of the reasons the suburbs had so many negatives was that in order to go to non-chain restaurants and cool coffee shops and all that kind of thing, you had to go to town. You really had to go to town. And Sarasota is small, so there wasn't 3 different downtown districts you could go to, like a Tampa. You go to the one. And they really, beyond that, you had a Publix and a Walgreens and all that kind of stuff. But now they've really expanded the commercial presence to orient the residents. So for instance, if you go north, you have Fruitville Commons. Fruitville is the northern port into the beaches in downtown. You have to go east to west in Sarasota to get to the coast. So Fruitville is the exit where you shoot west. That's where you come down and shoot west. And so it's a great location for it. They put a Cooper's Hawk, which is like a winery restaurant. It's a chain, but it's nice. They put Big Top Brewery moved over there. There's a Dunkin' Donuts. There's a storage place. So it's got all that with it. But it's kind of a mixed-use place. It's small, but it bleeds right into Waterside. And Waterside Place is like a proper suburban downtown. That's one of the nicest downtowns within a neighborhood-based district I've ever seen. 25-foot wide sidewalks. It feels like if you bring your kids over there, once you get there, it's safe. There are a splash pad. There's a playground. Every restaurant of every choice. There's a brewery restaurant. There's a new Mexican restaurant they put in there, like an Italian trattoria. There's breakfast places. The farmers market is there in Lakewood Ranch. They moved it there. It's the #1 farmers market in the state of Florida. It's really, really nice. Apartments. There is a kayak, paddleboard, put in on the lakes there, and then the neighborhoods orient that. Downtown Lakewood Ranch is above it, which was already there, but it's nice. Really walkable. There's a district called Center Point where they moved the second location for one of the most popular seafood restaurants in the state of Florida, a really unique place called Owen's Fish Camp. Second place is over there. They put a Ruth Chris Steakhouse over there. O&A Coffee, which is a downtown-based boutique coffee shop. Their second location's over in Waterside, so you have less reason to shoot into downtown Sarasota. And then University Town Center is over there as well, and that's a really, really nice place with a mall and bunch of restaurants that surround it. It's very, very high-end upscale feeling, almost like the International Plaza in certain ways to what Tampa is, and this would be the Sarasota version. And then, Venice has downtown Welland Park now. So they're doing this in many, many places, which again allows you to kind of live, work, and play in your area without going to the town. So the town's almost a bonus. So that's one big thing I wanted to mention. The second thing is new master plan neighborhoods on the rise that will give you locations that you didn't have access to. So I mentioned how Lakewood Ranch, Venice, Sarasota, and then everything else. Well, and I mentioned how Sarasota is vague and it's random neighborhoods around each other. Well, one of the biggest things they're doing is expanding this High Hat and 3H Ranch area, which sits right behind I-75 to the east. And it gives you basically if you had that in Sarasota, it might really say, why would you go to Lakewood Ranch or Welland in the minds of the people? Because now you don't have just one random neighborhood. You have these mini Watersides and Welland Parks in Sarasota. That's what this is going to be. So with 3H Ranch they're proposing right now, it sits right behind Sky Ranch, so parallel to Siesta Key. They're proposing 14 neighborhoods in a swath of acreage that gives you a bunch of different builders, a bunch of different communities. You're going to see Neal in there, you're going to see Lennar in there, you're going to see Pulte in there, and the same kind of players. But now it allows you to choose between Waterside, Mid-Sarasota, and Venice, and maybe choose more lifestyle first, not did I sacrifice house. That one really keep an eye on. So High Hat Ranch, H-I, not G-H, and then 3H Ranch. Talked about those in the past, but that's one. Two, there's one called Seaflower. So Seaflower is another one that's going to be, 2,000 plus homes and multiple builders, and you're going to see Pulte and Neal and all these guys in there as well. But where Seaflower is based is in Western Bradenton. So this is right by the IMG Academy. It's 3.2 miles one way to the beach through Cortez. And this allows you to go to an area that no one would think of as master plan new construction and have coastal proximity, and that's mainland Western Bradenton. The one I barely mentioned it before, but that is one area that especially does not look suburban, that's for sure. This would be an area that you would go to get a lot more affordability versus like the main downtown Sarasota area, but it's still very, very up and coming. Seaflower, they're proposing to basically build an entire square with a mini downtown and a village center and all that kind of thing, but now it gives you an access to an area that on a map, macro-wise, looks fantastic. But if you had your $1 million house next to the modular homes that existed across the street, that's the big hang up in people's mind. So keep an eye on Seaflower. Again, this is just about access, like things that didn't exist before. And then one other one I think is interesting is the expansion right below Palmer Ranch. So they're basically building a mini Palmer Ranch, kind of. I think at maturity it'll look like that, from the Osprey Nokomis to northern Venice. So it's an east to west thing. And if you look at what Palmer Ranch was, it's a bunch of master plan communities from bottom of Sieski over to the east. That's exactly what they're doing. So you have Talon Preserve in Nokomis, and you go to northern Venice, and you have Magnolia, you have Silo, Vincenza, Aria, and they're really expanding that. They put 2 hospitals right in that same area. They're expanding the roads to shoot east to west a lot more. So 10 years, that thing's going to give you access in a big way as well. So again, in these random towns where you're like, Osprey Nokomis, I don't like Talon Preserve, I can't see a fit. These aren't going to look the same way in a few years. And for an incoming buyer, I think this is all a good thing for the most part. All right, my friends, that is a wrap for our 2025 edition of A to Z Sarasota. Again, my name is Adam Hancock, if we have not met. I hope you enjoyed this take. I know it's lengthy, but this is meant to be a guide that can help you throughout your whole process. If you did and you happen to not be subscribed to the Florida Relocation Guide, please consider subscribing. We have a lot planned for 2025. That's the best way to see what's coming next. I'm going to try to go every Sunday and Wednesday, 4 p.m. Central and 5 p.m. Eastern. And we're going to do things like this, like we're going to deep dive on things that you really want to know about Venice, Sarasota, Lakewood Ranch, throughout. But we're also going to talk about how Sarasota fits across the whole state of Florida. I'm going to talk about finance a lot more in 2025. What's the housing market doing, why you should care, how Sarasota fits into the conversation. So this is the place to find all of that. We have a relocation guide that's for download in the description box below. I also put out kind of a manifesto email that's kind of the way I talk, but it's way more consumable. So I put one out we just revamped it. So it's something I used to do. It's a stream of consciousness style email that's all in bullets. So it goes boom, 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 boom. Everything I think is interesting in the real estate market, all new developments, all the detail. It's a month's worth of information, 1 paragraph at a time. Comes out on the last day of every month. We put one out in November, and the next one is December 30th, probably, most likely. So you can just subscribe to that for free in the description box below. If you can't find it, just email us. Call, email, text, all of our contact information should be sitting here somewhere. We have an amazing team. So if you like any of this kind of content, you're looking for an in-depth take, a non-regular realtor perspective, especially if you're relocating, we're as deep as it gets. Our team is right on the back of this YouTube channel. It's not random. I'm not referring people that call me out to anyone. This is the same level of thinking. We treat relocation super seriously. We know how difficult that is from out of state. We have a lot of examples to assist you in your journey. We do more new construction density than anyone, probably in the United States, definitely in the state of Florida. So again, we have a lot of leverage when it comes to incentives, what you should do. We know the next 5 communities coming for the most part behind the one you're trying to buy in. All of that's going to help you have a no regrets kind of choice. So I think you'll see that if you give us a ring. But either way, please consider all of that. If you don't need any of that, thank you so much for consuming any of my content. We'll see you on the next one.